Hello there, you're watching the Press Preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. So over the next half hour, we'll be seeing what's making the headlines with the writer Ellie Mae and the Mail on Sunday commentator Dan Hodges. Say hello to both of you. So let's take a look then at what's on some of those front pages. We've only actually had a few in so far, but let me run you through them. In The Observer, former top civil servants have warned Theresa May that squabbling amongst ministers and an overburdened administration risks derailing Brexit plans. The Sunday Telegraph reports a gender pay gap will be revealed at the BBC this week as the broadcaster publishes the salaries of its highest earners. And the Mail on Sunday has a leaked memo that it says shows that France has boasted that it will use Brexit to sabotage the UK economy. So just 3 in so far, but we'll keep a very close eye because as soon as the others pop in, we'll show them to you, and no doubt they will very soon. In the meantime, let's discuss those front pages and some of the stories inside the papers with Ellie Mae and Dan Hodges. So hello properly to both of you. You've picked out the Mail on Sunday's front page story to kick us off. They're reporting a plot, a French plot. What exactly is this plot that they're suggesting is going on?
It's a great story, actually. It's a political editor, Simon Walters, has got this leaked memo from Jeremy Brown, who's the former Lib Dem minister, who is now the City of London's Brexit envoy. And it's a memo to ministers which basically shows that the French are in a sort of typically perfidious French way, getting ready to sweep in and basically steal business and financial business from the City of London on the back of Brexit. Now, in one sense, I mean, although the memo is a great scoop, obviously, this is what we always feared, or those of us that advocated a Remain position. This is what we always feared, that Britain would be exposed in this way. And of course, the great irony is, if you go back to the Brexit debate, one of the big arguments by the Brexiteers was, if we go for Brexit, we will suddenly regain our sovereignty. Well, from the look of this, it looks like what sovereignty is going to look like is the French coming in and sweeping away half of the City of London. So
well, that's what they want, isn't it? And that's no big surprise, is it? Because I think they've been quite open about trying to make a pitch for those workers. So it's not necessarily a shock that they would want to, but whether or not they can is another question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, regular viewers of Sky Papers will know that it's rare that me and Dan agree on things, but I actually do agree with Dan. I think this is unsurprising. OK, he's about to have a cardiac arrest. This is unsurprising and also inevitable. And what I would add is that I think it's in France's best interests to make sure that Brexit isn't a success, because obviously the National Front is still they lost the election, but they're still very popular in France. And the worry is that if they get in the next election, then they would want to have a Frexit, if you like. And so I think that it's in the best interests of the current French government to make sure that Brexit is a failure, so that French voters aren't attracted by their own version of that as well.
I mean, obviously, we don't know to what extent any French pitch for British bankers would be successful, but Macron has tried to make it, or promised to make it, an appealing environment, hasn't he? He's talked about slashing red tape and removing bureaucracy and all that kind of thing. I mean, is that likely to work? Yeah,
he has. I mean, I think there is actually a very interesting line here in which it says, Mr Brown even hints that they, as in the French, are acting out of spite, making a virtue of rejecting a partnership with Britain. And I think this is one of the other dangers. Not that just we see ourselves we're sort of opening business up to this sort of grand larceny by the French, but also that the key thing, if you speak to ministers, the key thing at the heart of the Brexit negotiations is this: do our European partners actually want a deal at all? Do they actually want to give us a fair break? Or do they actually want to make an example of Britain and essentially punish us for our temerity in deciding to opt for Brexit and in a sense, undermine the grand European project? And, Jeremy Brown is articulating what I think a number of people are starting to articulate, which is the big problem is, whatever we offer, Europe, whatever concessions we give, whatever our negotiating stance is, they, for sort of macro, sort of European political reasons, need to make sure we get a bad deal out of this and that we are seen to suffer.
And yet Brexiteers would say that's biting off their nose to spite their face, because they want to do trade with us. They have, you know, a huge amount of trade with the UK, and it's in their financial interest to keep those good deals going.
Yeah, but I think it's important to remember that the EU is 7 times the size of the UK. They do actually hold all the cards, or most of the cards. And so I think, you know, the idea that some of the key Brexiteers have, that we can just, you know, have what they called it, the have your cake and eat it strategy, which they apparently now abandoned. I think that was quite fanciful. But I do think that, you know, the current government has been quite adversarial in terms of Brexit negotiations, you know, at points kind of implying that the EU was sort of trying to sabotage the election and so on. I don't think that is a particularly helpful tone to take, despite the fact that, you know, I do think negotiations might be quite fraught at times.
OK, well, we'll stay on the theme of Brexit, because the next story that you've picked out is the Observer's front page story. Former civil service head warns May of Brexit chaos. So who is it that's saying this?
Well, this is Gus O'Donnell, the former head of the civil service. I mean, to be perfectly honest, this is Gus O'Donnell saying this. I mean, if you look at the papers, you could take your pick of who's saying, you know, Brexit crisis stories. This is a slightly different angle. This is that, as Michael Savage and Jamie Dowd report, that the top former civil servants are warning that squabbling amongst the cabinet and an overburdened administration are putting Brexit at risk. Well, if these are the key determinants, then Brexit really is scuppered, because obviously the squabbling amongst cabinet ministers is since the election has been happening on an almost daily basis. And I mean, this is I think another key element: the extent to which Brexit is now just essentially sucking the life out of the government and just overburdening the government. I mean, I was actually chatting to David Davis last week. We were just having a sort of a casual chat, and I said, "Are you going away on holiday anywhere?" And he said, "No, I was going away for 2 or 3 weeks, but I've decided I'm not going to now, because I'm going to have to stay and sort of manage the whole Brexit process." And that's just a sort of a very light way of illustrating just the extent to which Brexit is now dominating every minister's every minister's inbox.
Well, yes, and that's not a big surprise, isn't it, given the scale of the task that has to be done in under 2 years? No,
I mean, I think good is what I would say about David Davis cancelling his holiday, because Brexit was his idea, so he should be arrested. But I do think it is worrying that the extent to which Brexit is kind of like becoming this like black hole into which all government policy is sort of falling into. You know, I think there's so many problems in Britain at the moment with the economy. You know, we're going to get onto lots of these different problems, the cuts to the NHS, the public sector pay cut, you know, lots of different challenges facing Britain at the moment. And it worries me that Brexit is so dominant in our politics, because I think there's lots of things that we need to talk about and sort out as a country.
Well, we will come on to those, I think, in the next section. But for the moment, let's stick with politics and the politics surrounding Brexit, if you can call David Davis. I mean, he's at the heart of it, isn't he? So, and now, according to the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, but also an article inside the Mail as well, there seems to be more talk about putting David Davis in Theresa May's position.
There is. The question is who's doing the talking. I mean, the question is whether this is the trouble with it, whenever you get this sort of leadership speculation. Is this actually the principals? Is this David Davis doing this, or is it actually allies of David Davis, or is it allies of David Davis? I mean, what's interesting, I think, with Ben Riley-Smith's piece is, you know, and it does give an example of just how febrile the atmosphere is at the moment. I mean, here we've got on the front page, Davis has 30 MPs backing him for leader. Now, he's going to lead a lot more than that if he wants to be Prime Minister. But that's where we are now. I mean, Theresa May, I think to an extent, has stabilised her position. And speaking to Tory MPs, I don't get a sense of a great appetite, certainly amongst the backbenchers, for a contest. But these leadership stories keep popping up, because there are still people, for whatever reason, who just keep stirring the pot on this.
Well, yes, and let's take a look at the story that's inside the Mail on Sunday. Team DD, David Davis, get Phil on board and derail Bojo bandwagon. There's certainly plenty of talk about it, isn't there, going on? I mean, how helpful is that, given the seriousness of the task going on?
I mean, I think it's not surprising because, you know, you say that Theresa May has stabilised her position, but she comes across to me as a sort of an empty vessel at the moment who doesn't really know what she's doing. You know, she's lost her two closest advisors, Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, and she seems like she doesn't really know what to do without them. I mean, there was a sort of bizarre incident earlier this week where she approached Jeremy Corbyn and kind of effectively asked him for policy ideas, and it was sort of a very strange thing.
Although it's that strange, I mean, given that she didn't get the majority that she'd hoped for when she called the election, she was kind of saying, I need to listen more to other people's ideas and take those on board and reflect the general election result.
I mean, I think that's one way of looking at it. I think the way that I would look at it is that it was a bit of an act of desperation. I think the other factor to bear in mind is also that I think she's underconfident about Brexit negotiations going well, and she sort of wants the Labour Party to kind of share the blame. So it doesn't surprise me that there's whisperings about the Tory leadership because, you know, from all of the sort of speculations in Westminster, it sounds like there's a lot of people who are very cross with Theresa May and cross about the election. My feeling, though, is that the Tories will kind of keep her on and allow her to sort of absorb all the toxicity, and then once that's done, then they will sort of get rid of her and then kind of have a new start, if you like, with a new leader.
Because some people had suggested that if there was a leadership battle at the top of the Tory party, it could end up triggering another general election, and the Tories were worried about that.
No,
do you think that's...
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you speak to ordinary backbench Tory MPs, the last thing they want is a leadership election at the moment, because if there is a leadership election, then this fault line that runs through the Tory party with, on the one hand, the sort of the younger, modernising, sort of pro-Remain members of the cabinet, and the more traditional sort of Brexit cabinet members, that fault line will just completely split apart, and that will let Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street. That's what they believe. So that they genuinely don't want that at the moment. But I mean, thank goodness I can now get back to disagreeing with Ellie. I mean, the reason why I say she stabilised her position is, you know, it was only a couple of weeks ago that Jeremy Corbyn was telling everybody, you know, boasting to everybody at Glastonbury he was going to be Prime Minister at Christmas. Now, I don't think he is going to be Prime Minister at Christmas. Despite what everybody said, she got the deal with the DUP when people said she couldn't. She got her Queen's speech through when Jeremy Corbyn and others said she wouldn't. As we've just said, I think the leadership speculation is
achievements, though.
Well, compared to where she was, you know, one step at a time.
OK, and we must take a pause now, but plenty more to talk about after the break, including how a row could be on the horizon over gender pay at the BBC. That's coming up. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. With me tonight, the writer Ellie Mae O'Hagan and the Mail on Sunday commentator Dan Hodges. And we're going to turn our attention back to the front page of The Observer, but it's the other story there beneath the new Wimbledon champions picture about the NHS. And it talks about the scale of unnecessary NHS deaths. So what exactly is this article telling us?
This article is saying that because of a shortage of staff and equipment, essentially that people are dying unnecessarily. And, you know, the reason I actually wanted to talk about this story, and the reason for that is because I think that I want to ask the question of who consented to this, who voted for this. I didn't vote for this. I'm sure that most of your viewers didn't vote to have such cuts in the NHS that people are dying unnecessarily. Where is the accountability here? You know, how do we reverse this? I think these are questions that need to be asked, because this really is a disgrace and it needs to be investigated.
Well, yes, and there has been more of a debate in recent times, hasn't there, about where the money for public services should come from, and you know, whether people are prepared to pay more tax if they feel it's going to go directly to the NHS or to public sector workers' pay. Yeah,
I mean, and it just takes us back to what I think is going to become the defining issue of the moment, which is where are we with austerity? Where are we with as you say, public sector pay? Where are we with investment in public services? I mean, to answer Ellie's question, though, who voted for this? Not a majority, but a plurality of the British people voted for this in the last election, which is why Theresa May and the Conservatives got 1 million votes more than Labour Party. Now, they obviously didn't vote for unnecessary NHS deaths.
That's what they're getting.
But they...
As a result of government policy?
Yeah, but I mean, but the reality is that we went into an election campaign in which the Labour Party again told everybody you've only got 24 hours to save the NHS. I mean, how many times has the NHS died under the Tories, according to
We also went into a
Labour?
Brexit vote where the majority of people were told that the 350 million a week would go towards the NHS. And even Dominic Cummings, who ran the Leave campaign, admitted that without that claim, Leave wouldn't have won. So it's clear that people don't want the NHS cut. It's clear that people want more funding for the NHS. I don't think people consented to this.
Yeah, but Dominic Cummings says that because Dominic Cummings doesn't want people to know, doesn't want to admit the real reason, which is because they ran a disgusting scare story on immigration is why they won. I personally don't think there were many people who did think there was suddenly going to be all this magic money tree for the NHS, and if they did believe it, frankly, they were idiots, because everybody at the time knew that was
public idiots.
No, I'm calling anybody who seriously thought there was going to be an extra 350
Well, why wouldn't they
million
think that? It was plastered on the side of a bus with politicians in this country standing in front of it. Why does that make sense?
Absolutely, because obviously everybody always believes whatever politicians put on the side of their buses, don't they, Ellie? I mean, no one's ever questioned.
You're saying that it's all right for politicians to lie?
No, I'm not saying it's all right for politicians to lie. I'm saying I don't honestly believe that there were many people who actually believed that if you voted for Brexit, hey presto, the NHS was going to be.
But why? They'd be perfectly entitled to believe that because that's what they were told.
Why would they be entitled to believe it? It's not true.
Because they were told, but they were told that by people who are supposed to know about these things. Because that's why we elect them.
Yes, but they're grown adults who are able to suspend disbelief and analyse the message that are put in front of them in the middle of campaigns. Did you believe it?
No, I didn't believe it, but that's because But that's because I have a particular political leaning.
We're the clever ones, are we? And those silly people out there, it's those
I'm not saying it makes me more intelligent. I'm saying that I come from a particular political standpoint, which makes me deeply suspicious and cynical.
Well, I don't come from that standpoint, and I didn't fall for it. I didn't fall for it either, did I? And I don't think the British people did. I don't think that's why they voted for Brexit. I'm
going to crack on because we've only got a minute left, and we did promise that we'd talk about the front page story on the Sunday Telegraph. BBC brace for gender pay row. I think that salaries are going to be released, I think, to the May public, aren't they, this week? And there's a suggestion here that there might be a gap.
Indeed, and some of us are very excitedly looking forward to seeing how much our highly paid BBC broadcasters are being paid. But I think the issue here is it going to show a significant gender gap? And from the look of it, it is going to show a significant gender gap. I've got to be honest. I'm not going to say knock me down with a feather. That's exactly what I expected. But it's obviously going to be very, very embarrassing for the BBC if this is exposed. And it's worth remembering that the BBC has fought tooth and nail to stop these figures coming out.
OK, we ought to go to the weather now, but transparency generally a good thing, do you think, in this situation, if it does, make it clearer how the money's being spent?
Yeah, absolutely. The gender pay gap is a problem across society. It's not just the BBC, it's everywhere. And I would also add that the media has a serious problem with working class voices, and I feel that is almost more of a problem than the gender issue, and that is what we should also be discussing.
OK, well, maybe we can discuss both those issues a bit more depth at 11:30 when you'll be back. For the moment, though, thanks very much indeed.